Much of what we learn about science, nature, and the environment happens outside of school, beyond the walls of museums, zoos, and nature centers. I have worked as an independent environmental professional for many years and know there are others like me who interact with the public in communities worldwide. On the Talaterra podcast, we discover who these professionals are, what they do, and how they create change. Why do I focus on independent professionals? I focus on them because of their ability to move freely between different contexts, like schools, organizations, businesses, and communities. This demonstrates something powerful: the transferable nature of environmental education skills. These professionals have developed approaches and solutions that can be applied wherever people want to understand or engage with environmental topics. Thank you for joining us today. I'm your host, Tanya Marion. Today we get to learn from Matthew Paneitz. Matthew is the founder and executive director of Long Way Home, the organization that built Hero School, a student-built and community-built campus in San Juan Comalapa, Guatemala. Built out of recycled tires and trash, the campus took 16 years to build and serves 178 students enrolled in PreK through high school. The school is almost complete. Matthew is also the recipient of the 2020 Sargent Shriver Award for Distinguished Humanitarian Service for his work in Guatemala. This award is presented annually by the National Peace Corps Association and is awarded to returned Peace Corps volunteers who continue to contribute to humanitarian causes. Long before this award and the existence of Hero School, Matthew had an idea that needed funding, direction, and partners. How did Matthew obtain funding when he started this project? How did he develop a strategy sustaining him and the school he built with the residents of Comalapa? Let's find out. So, Matthew, thank you so much for reaching out, for introducing me to Long Way Home, and for being here today to talk about your work.
It's wonderful to be here. Thank you for the invitation.
So when we spoke earlier, we talked about focusing on how you launched this project, the decisions made and not made, and how you made it sustainable enough to enable you and your team to do your work again and again and again. And so before we get into that, I would like to go back to when you first joined the Peace Corps. How did you get involved with the Peace Corps?
I filled out the application, and although normally Peace Corps volunteers are supposed to have a 4-year degree, I had a 2-year degree, and I was a paramedic working in Southwest Virginia, and took all the steps and then did the training. I had not traveled very much. I think I'd been to, Europe for a week one time, or a very brief amount of time. And, but I'd never been to Central America. So yeah, we got our assignment and we decided, okay, Guatemala, here we go. And I'd never even heard of Guatemala before. So it was a completely new experience and intimidating. And I probably was scared at the time, but took it as it came.
That's wonderful. So, and what about your experience made you want to return to Guatemala?
Well, after I did my Peace Corps experience, and I moved back to the United States. I got a normal job, enrolled in school so I could finish that 4-year degree. And then I couldn't turn it off. Basically, for the first time in my life, I'd seen extreme poverty. I found out that a lot of our brothers and sisters are living in a fairly difficult situation. And I couldn't turn it off, is the way I would say it. Like, I wanted to go back and I wanted to help. And I knew that I didn't have a lot of resources So I raffled my 1973 Caprice Classic convertible. I sold all of my belongings. I bought a $500 Volkswagen Jetta where the windows didn't work, and drove all the way from Oregon back to Guatemala and got started.
So when you said, I want to do this, who listened to you?
Yeah. I thought a lot of people were listening to me because I couldn't stop talking about it. All my friends, I was like, so you want to go and you want to go. And I thought that I was going to go down there with 25 people. And I ended up picking up a friend in Dallas, and he rode down, then picked up a friend in Austin. And they were there for a little while, but didn't stay very long. So, I ended up pretty much starting Long Way Home by myself, and then met people along the way. And that's how the organization slowly, organically was built up, was by spreading the word, talking to people, and being enthusiastic about the topic.
Okay, so your initial idea was to do what when you returned to Guatemala?
Initially, I went back to build a city park because the counterpart agency that I was working with while I was a Peace Corps volunteer, they owned this piece of property, and they never fully developed this piece of property. There was the makings of a soccer field, but nothing else was really going on there. And so I thought recreation was really important. There was no city parks in that town. There was no grass soccer field. And I thought, hey, let's, work with the kids. Let's give them something to do outside of all the work and everything else that they have to do. So let's give them some fun. And so we built a city park, and it went really well.
Oh, okay. That's a big move, a very bold move, and I think that's a wonderful move that you made. Now, my audience includes environmental educators who have launched their own initiatives or are planning to or are navigating the messy middle in some way and wondering how they get to do what they do again. When you went down to Guatemala to launch your project, to work on the park project, and then to work beyond the park project, how did you fund your work in the beginning?
Well, we used to charge volunteers a, a small amount of money. I think it was like $50 a month to come and live at the park as we were building it. Right. And so there was some housing there, enough for 5 to 8 volunteers to live semi uncomfortably. We didn't have very reliable water or electricity. And so what I would do was go to the tourist towns and hang out for a little while. And then if I met somebody, I would say, for $50, you can come and jump off of the tourist trail. There's a lot of really cool tourist spots in Guatemala that people visit all the time. And so I was offering something outside of that, in San Juan Comalapa, like, it's a 97% indigenous town, and the people are really nice. There's artists and weavers there. And so what I was basically offering was, hey, jump off the tourist trail and let's try something else. And that appealed to a lot of people because otherwise there'd be no reason to visit San Juan Comalapa.
Yeah. So you're recruiting people. Makes me think of, and I can't think of the name at the moment, the organization that offers travel experiences, but also work experiences in different countries across the world. But sounds like you started that yourself for your local audience for where you were. Okay, so was that a strategy that was reliable enough to last long term, or how long did that last you, and when did your strategy change, and how did it change over time?
Well, we're still doing that, right? Now we charge $85 for a week to volunteer with us, and we've had thousands of volunteers. And then a lot of those volunteers became board members. And so as they left Guatemala and their experience with us stayed in their heart, they said, how can I keep helping? And then so some of them through fundraisers, and they recruited other volunteers. Some of them have family members who were part of a foundation. And so we got some small grants here and there. So the pieces started to come together in that there were a lot of people out in the world that wanted to use their resources. Sometimes it'd be a $5 a month donation. Sometimes people would say, here's $1,000. And so it started to come together little by little. And that's really still what's happening now.
Okay, so this strategy, this having people from all over coming over to volunteer and to contribute to the project in the way that you've described has worked for you for a very long time, but it hasn't always been a smooth road. Sometimes you've run out of money here and there. And what did you do in those moments?
Sure. So whenever you're living in San Juan Comalapa, you notice that people are weavers and they're painters. And so if you go to a neighbor's house and you're looking to buy firewood or some snacks or something, and when you knock on the door and you look through the door, in the background, there's always people weaving. And they might be doing that on a backstrap type of weaving setup, or maybe a full-on loom. And so those people would say, hey, why don't you come in and check it out? And so I'm curious and I'm friendly. I would say, sure, and walk in, and they would go, hey, would you like to buy some of our textiles? And so, sometimes I would say, sure, I'll buy one and gift one to my mom or something. But at some point, what I'd said to them was, I would like some of these textiles to help me raise money. And so they would say, okay, we'll give you these textiles on loan and then bring us the money when you've come back from the US and trying to sell these. And so there was a lot of trust in that I would come back and that I would give them the money that I promised them. And that happened for a long time. A lot of people trusted me. And so I sold paintings and I sold all kinds of textiles, and that really helped us get started.
The school that you built is such a community effort. I mean, a true community effort, and a community economic development project. So the core mission of Long Way Home revolves around sustainability and education and this community economic development effort. What did it look like for you in the very beginning, and what does it look like for you now? How is that community effort working?
Yeah, our mission has evolved. Like I said, we started off thinking about how to provide recreation, and there, what you notice is that a lot of people need jobs, right? And so they saw that we were building a park, and we would occasionally hire somebody to help us out around the park. But then also people would show up and they would say, hey, I really need a job so I can support my family. And so even really without having the money to do so, we would say absolutely, and then figure out how to do it sort of on the backside. And so that turned into 1, 2, 3 employees. Into at some point we had over 35 employees prior to COVID. And all of the people that we hired, we fully depended on them to understand the town, to understand where we could go and buy materials, because it's not like you walk into a Home Depot and you get, kind of your options laid out for you. You have to go to this person if you need sand and this person if you need rebar, and you really have to work within what the community members can tell you that you have available to you to know what your options are, and you sort of together. So you fully rely on the community members to be able to do your work. And those collaborations were and continue to be critical to our success.
So tell us about Hero School.
Sure. Hero School is what we decided to work on right after building the park. So while building the park, we saw that there were kids carrying firewood on their heads instead of going to school, that people were carrying water, that they were doing the very basics to survive. Also, when you walk into a neighbor's house, you'd see that they're cooking over open flames indoors, right? And smoke-filled rooms, and that people were having a very difficult time with with the basics, right? And so we knew that we could build because I was, in addition to being a paramedic um, before joining the Peace Corps, I was also a builder. And the co-founder of Long Way Home, he was also a builder. So we sort of leaned in the direction of wanting to build infrastructure for families. And, while we were building the park, we built a stove here and a compost latrine there, a couple of water tanks. And we saw that it had a major impact on people's lives, that they could store water, and this impacts led us to want to scale a little bit. And so when we got toward, close to finishing the park, we said, okay, let's build something bigger. And I called my friend and I said, I'd like to build a school. And my friend said, have you ever thought about building a school out of trash? And of course I was like, no, that has never occurred to me. He showed me a book about how to build a house out of tires. We went through all the steps. The house that we built was really successful in the sense that we were able to use a whole lot of the rubbish that we found on the ground, because Guatemala doesn't really have a very good way to manage their trash. People are burying it or burning it or throwing it in the river. And so we said, hey, let's use this trash to build infrastructure. We can sort of offset the costs. Plus, we can make stuff that is going to be more resilient potentially than what was happening at the time using cinder blocks. And so we bought a piece of property in 2008. And by January 2009, we were working on the campus. And we're really close to finishing it. It only took us, 16 years?
Yeah, that is fantastic. Man, how did that you and your co-founder started it and applied all of your construction know-how, and then how did you recruit people to help, and who helped, and who are you teaching along the way now?
Yeah, well, sustainable living is a really popular topic. Let's put it that way. Like, people want to know how to harvest water. They want to use alternative materials when building their homes. And so whenever we were building the campus, the Hero School campus, we built the very first structure out of tires. And then we involved volunteers in that from all over the world. And then we hired a local Guatemalan crew, and everybody loved it, which is kind of shocking because it's really hard work. We're talking about taking a tire, several wheelbarrows of dirt, sledgehammers, and then beating the dirt into the side of the tire, which can be pretty exhausting work when you decide to work with a sledgehammer. Yet people loved working that way. And then it became sort of popular. And then we moved from the tire building to using earth bags. And then we started trying out bamboo and then using eco bricks in the walls and then combining all of these materials. And people all over the world thought that was interesting enough to want to volunteer with us to contribute to that mission so that they could learn as well and bring it back to their communities. And then it really took off, and we're still doing it. Like, we finished a building about 5 or 6 days ago that took us 1 month to build a 650 square foot classroom in a small village near Comalapa.
Wow. And who were your partners in that project? That's fast work.
Yeah, well, at one point there were 60 people on site, right? And so ecohab.org are some of the best builders in the world, and they operate out of New Mexico. And so they called us and they said, hey, we would like to, in addition to some of the projects we're doing in New Mexico, we would also like to do some humanitarian builds. And we had worked with them in the past in 2011, and they were like, okay, we're ready to do this again. They brought a whole team of people, and their team of people were experts in building walls and doing finishes and foundations. They designed the building. And then we got a call from an organization called Team Up. And Team Up said, hey, our model is to bring volunteers. Those volunteers will raise money so that we can build a classroom. So combining Team Up with EcoHab, we had expertise and we had funding. And then Long Way Home brought volunteers as well. And together we built that classroom.
Wow. So you have a strong network, and people are calling you, and you, of course, over the years have reached out to many people. You've established a network effect. I mean, how many people do you reach out to tell the story of Long Way Home, or and introduce people to Long Way Home? I know I've seen you shared a picture where you've given a presentation at is it UNESCO, right? And then how many types of events like that do you do, or have you done over time?
Well, we're hyper focused on our program services and really doing our work and doing it well. And I think word of mouth has been where we've been able to spread the word the most, because people come to our campus, they do this really interesting work, and then they go out and they tell other people. And then outside of that, we occasionally win an award. And so we won that award through UNESCO for the education model that we developed, which was based on education for sustainable development. And I think they gave me like 2 minutes at their, big fancy UNESCO convention area. And I got to talk there, and I occasionally get to go places and people ask me questions and I get to speak a little bit. And now that the campus is approaching completion, we're focused a little more on getting the word out, because, that takes time and effort, and it's hard to do both, right? It's hard to build the whole campus and educate 178 children and put all that together and also tell people about it. That takes some expertise, and, we get help from people doing that. And that's what happened recently. A donor reached out and said, "Hey, I would like you to have access to an entire marketing team, because you could certainly use some help with that." And then they gave us an entire marketing team, and that marketing team is helping us now.
Oh, that's fantastic. Just fantastic. So in addition to your UNESCO award, in 2020, you received the Sargent Shriver Award for Distinguished Humanitarian Service. It was presented by the National Peace Corps Association. What changed for you after your work was recognized this way, and also by UNESCO? You mentioned people are reaching out to you, but how else has things changed for you as more and more people know about you?
Well, I think we can do all of the work and we can show results, but that doesn't necessarily give us the credibility that we need to continue to fund what it is we're doing. And so whenever the Peace Corps reached out and said, "We would like to award you," I think that, by putting that on the internet and letting people know that other people are vetting us, like UNESCO, that tells people that we're legitimate and that the work that we're doing is being done well enough for major organizations to want to be able to help and recognize us. And that gives us, it changes in the sense that we kind of feel like we're on an island out there working and needing more help. And it changes in the fact that we get more help and people reach out to us instead of us having to reach out to them. And that is a huge benefit for us.
So what I'm hearing in the story that you've been sharing with us is that you've established trust, which is very important with the partners. You've established some credibility, and all this have helped strengthen your network and build the network effect. And that's all led in one way or another to you being able to do your work again and again from year to year. And it's wonderful that you have partners that have donated a marketing team, and that's fantastic. That is very, very exciting. Very exciting. So Long Way Home has a reach extending far beyond the construction of your main campus, which is almost done. What types of sustainable construction projects do you lead? Because you do more than just work on your campus.
Yeah, we've had a couple of really nice invitations to work in other countries. On one occasion, we had a volunteer come to Guatemala and work on one of our projects. And then that volunteer said, "Hey, I'm in the Free State in South Africa, and I'm going to be building a building at an orphanage soon. will you come here and show us how to do that? Because although, there was a lot of people doing a lot of wonderful work there, there wasn't a lot of work being done with building structures out of tires. And so that person brought our team over, and we were able to bring 3 or 4 Guatemalans from our town who had not, left the town very much, right? So we're able to put them on an airplane, fly them all the way to South Africa. And for them, that's a huge deal because they're being recognized for their work as well as some of the best green builders in the world. And then while we were in the Free State, another volunteer showed up from Cape Town, and that volunteer liked our work. And that volunteer said, "Hey, would you like to build a school in Cape Town?" And so we got to go and work in one of the townships to build pretty much an entire school campus there. Also with partners, the city of Cape Town was, doing a lot of the work, and the Natural Building Collective is who actually brought us on board to do that project. And so we all collaborated, and, we probably put 3,000 or 4,000 tires into the walls there on that school campus. And I don't think it had happened before that as well. And so, yeah, we've gotten to do some work in a few different other countries.
Can you provide an overview for listeners about what it's like to use a tire as a major construction supply material?
Sure. So first of all, you have to find them, right? In Guatemala, they don't have gigantic tire centers like a lot of other places. They have a lot of like mom and pop tire shops, right? In which there will be, a little tire shop and then 10 or 15 tires stacked outside from whatever tire got changed. And then we would take a flatbed truck and drive around and pick up those tires 10, 15 at a time. So we're also a benefit to them because they would have to pay to get them removed, and they may not be being removed and disposed of very well, right? They might end up being burned or thrown in a ravine. So, yeah, we collected them little by little. Now in Cape Town, the city of Cape Town, they actually brought the tires to us. They collected the tires and said, "We'd like to make this a lot easier for you." And so when you're actually building with a tire, you lay the tire flat on the ground, or you dig out a footer and then place the tire in the footer. And sometimes they can be 18-wheeler tires, right? And so you take a whole bunch of wheelbarrows of dirt, you put the wheelbarrows inside of the tire, then you take a sledgehammer, can be 8 or 10 pounds, and then you beat the dirt into the side of the tire until it swells up a little bit. And then you stack another one on top of that. But you sort of offset them like you would bricks. You don't set them straight one on top of the other. You offset them, and then you can make your way around and start to come up and do like 10 or 11 courses of tires to build an entire wall.
That's amazing. And I've seen on your website that you're also using plastic bottles and just and how you use trash as I don't want to call it filler, but it is filler. I mean, it's as part of your building material. Can you explain how you use that as well for listeners?
Yeah, there's a bunch of different ways to use plastic bottles. You can put them within chicken wire, in between columns to fill in spaces between your columns. Sometimes we will lay them flat and then put layers of cob or adobe between each layer of bottles and then sort of offset them as well. We could put them in between the tires because the idea is, of course, to build walls, but it's also to get the trash out of the waste stream. So if you put them in a tire wall and you put it in the void from between two tires, what you end up doing is being able to use less material to build the wall out, because the finished product isn't a tire wall. You don't ever see the tires once you're complete. You end up doing a lime plaster, and that is the finished layer. So yeah, we're always covering all of the rubbish that we do, except for the retaining walls, but all of the rubbish that we use in construction, including the plastic bottles, ends up with a finish layer as the final part.
It's amazing. I know that you teach people in different countries. Will you yourself be writing a book about your journey and how you build a construction book?
We worked with a couple of builders, one from Zimbabwe and the other from South Africa, and we wrote the green building manual, right? And so we laid out a lot of the details about how you do all of this work. And so I'm still, although I've done quite a bit of this work myself, I'm pretty much more of an administrator and I'm heading more in the academic direction. And so, as much as I would like to write a book specifically about this, I'm slightly more focused on the curriculum that we're developing for the students so that we can integrate these techniques into the education system so that the students at our school and at potentially other schools can also experience the benefits of combining theory and action into their education.
And how is that curriculum being developed? Is there anything you could share right now about how you're doing that?
Sure. So in Guatemala, the Ministry of Education, their learning objectives are somewhat abstract, right? And so that gives us a little bit of space to decide how we're going to teach math. They'll say you need to teach the kids that 2 + 2 is 4. Well, how you actually teach the 2 + 2 is 4 is sort of left up to us. And so now we will say, okay, 2 eco bricks plus 2 eco bricks equals 4 eco bricks. And then you can say that then you could ask a question within math class and go, how many eco bricks does it take to cover 300 square feet? And so then the students can work within that concept and within those parameters in order to do their math or do their science class or budget class. And so now we're involving the students. And whenever we build, let's say, a ventilated stove, we'll ask the students to design the stove, to budget for the stove, to practice. And so, we've wrapped this into the concepts for this infrastructure and spread it out across the subject matter, which means that we can still comply with the Ministry of Education standards, which is important if you want to scale it. If we had a curriculum and that curriculum didn't comply specifically with their regular standards, it would sort of be on an island and wouldn't be very accessible. But that's what we're doing is we're working with the teachers at our school and other consultants to combine all of these elements into an education so that our students can be engaged in the poverty fighting process, because that's a big part of this for us. We want to improve living conditions for people that are suffering, and we want to make it school interesting and engaging at the same time.
And the students' reaction to the curriculum?
It's what you would expect. Really, they love it. They love getting out of the classroom. Whenever I was in elementary school, I think my favorite part of elementary school were the field trips. And so this is a lot like a field trip, except for there's a benefit to the field trip that if there was a single mother with 5 children cooking over an open flame indoors, what she ends up with is a bunch of 6th or 7th graders from our school going into her home, building this stove. And so that mother is happy because her children are no longer getting sick. And then the students are feeling that they are part of their community, that they're contributing. It's a really empowering process to give people the ability to, fulfill their potential, right? Because they care. They want to do better. They want their community to improve, but it's hard to know how if you're them. And by including it into the curriculum, we've created a systematic approach. And can you imagine what that does to their self-esteem? They feel valuable.
Oh, that is wonderful. So your school covers pre-K through high school, and you had mentioned that, also career opportunities is one of your objectives around this project. Have any of the high school graduates continued with this type of construction work or gotten involved in other types of sustainability work?
Well, a lot of the builders that we hired initially to help us build the campus, they did go on to other construction jobs or went from being a construction helper to being a foreman, right? Because of what they learned while they were with us. Unfortunately, most of our high school students don't have anywhere to go in order to continue the world of poverty fighting and green building. I'm sure that some of them have moved over and started working for an NGO, but a lot of them use their opportunity to green build with us and get a high school education to continue to move into some other professional career. So what I'm hearing from our students is they will go to our high school and then they'll go, okay, now I want to be a nurse, or now I want to be a doctor, or now I want to be a lawyer. Because of their experience and how practical it was with us, it opens the door to their imagination. And, but then they also come back and engage our students as mentors later on because they're still part of the community. They still enjoyed the process and they also want to give back.
When I first learned about your project, it moved me so much. I mean, this was a big idea that got some momentum and look at all the things that you've been able to do and where it's progressed over this time. You've done so much already. What's next for you?
I'm really excited about what's next because we've really taken our time in building these structures and learning from them and working with the locals and working with the teachers and students. And now we have a real core group of people that's 250 of us, right? And so now we are in a space where we're innovating and thinking and questioning and working together. And so what gets to happen next, where we hope to see this go is that the other public schools will work with our curriculum. They will also be doing projects, and that the students in those other public schools and the teachers will be building stoves, water tanks, retaining walls, schools, homes, clinics as part of their curriculum. Then we can expand our impact. And then there's a benefit to the teachers and students that get to engage in that material. But then there will be, instead of, us building 20 or 30 projects per year, we can do 200 or we can do 1,000, and we can move towards eradicating extreme poverty in our town. And then if that works, when it works, why wouldn't it move to the next town? Who's going to say, you know what, that's working. What I don't want is to see extreme poverty eradicated in my town. So, we're super excited to see as many people as possible suffering the least amount as possible as soon as possible.
How can listeners learn more about Long Way Home and support your project?
Well, we have a whole bunch of YouTube videos, right? We have a lot of how-to videos, and all of our projects that we built are on lwhomegreen.org. We created profiles for every one of them so that people can, from, all over the world, that they have access to what we spend a lot of time and a lot of money learning how to do. We're also on Instagram and LinkedIn and Facebook, and my email address is matt@lwhome.org. Our website is lwhome.org, and I'm available all the time. As you can tell, I love talking about this. This is my favorite topic, and anybody that wants to jump in and volunteer, they're welcome. We have plenty of space in our volunteer house. We also accept service groups. So if you want to come as a group of 10 to 15 people, we charge $600 for a week. That includes food, lodging, and transportation from the airport. Then you can have a major impact with a group of people, say during spring break or around Christmas time, whenever you have time off. And We also accept donations. We need school supplies. We need advice. We need guidance. We're willing to work with pretty much everybody because where we thrive is other people's ideas. We have a lot of ideas ourselves, but the reason that we've had the success that we've had and the reason that we've grown the way that we have had is that we have had so many wonderful people from all over the world make a contribution to what we're doing.
That is beautiful. You thrive with other people's ideas. Yes, that is how it works. That's how this type of work works. Is there anything that you'd like listeners to know about Long Way Home that we have not yet discussed?
Yeah, I want to work with people to fight poverty on a massive scale. We're in a position to do something about this and do something soon. And the more people, the better. I mean, maybe we've said that, but I want to re-emphasize how close we are to making a major impact in the world and reducing suffering pronto.
Well, thank you for your work. Thank you for your team's work and the curriculum that you're building and implementing to impact so many people. Thank you, Matthew, for speaking with us today and for teaching us so much.
It's an honor. I'm happy to do it, happy to share, happy to continue this conversation, and thank you for the opportunity today to get to share our story.
To learn more about Long Way Home, be sure to see the show notes for this episode. Here you will find links to their website, YouTube channel, social accounts, and their profile page at Global Giving. Global Giving is an organization that supports other nonprofits by connecting them to donors and companies. December 2nd, 2025 is Giving Tuesday, and Global Giving is matching donations to nonprofits of your choice. Thank you for joining us today. See you next time.